Welcome, thank you for joining us for our weekly object talk. My name is Eliana and I am a member of the learning team at the Jewish Museum. Today you're joining us for an object talk on a few photographs from our collection. They're photographs on the Mashhadi Jewish Community. These objects are part of a collection of over 40,000 objects in the Jewish Museum designated collection that shows the diversity of Jewish life and history, and our programs exist to explore the connections between faiths and cultures. I'm now going to share my screen so that we can have a look at the objects more closely. So this is the first photograph that I'm going to show you. So we can see a big family posing in front of the camera in what looks like a courtyard of some kind. This is a photograph of the Aminoff family in the 1930s who have their roots in Iran, specifically Mashhad, outside their house in Jerusalem. 7 brothers lived in the house with their children, wives, and grandchildren. And the family moved from Russia and Iran in the late 1920s and 30s. Now, some members of the family came to England to study while their parents were on business here, and some remained, which is how I assume we came to acquire this photograph. Now, if you look at some of the older family members in the photograph, we can see some differences in dress. They are still very much influenced by the dress code of their country of origin, whereas the younger members of the family have adopted more of a Western style of dress. We can also see that this is a large family. Indeed, this was often the case in Persian Mashhadi Jewish community, since women tended to marry young and had lots of children. Mashhad, Iran's second most populous city and home to many sacred sites, is situated in the northeast of Iran, where you can see the red dot on this map. Now, settlement of Jewish families can be traced back to 1735, when a new ruler of the province of Khorasan, Nader Shah, invited Jewish merchant families to live in Mashhad. In 1747, Nader Shah was assassinated, and unfortunately after that, the Jewish community were not treated favourably. They were forced to wear identifying markers on their dress, and they were refused entry to parts of the city. In 1839, there was a dreadful attack on the Jewish community, which culminated in the forced conversion of Islam. From that point onwards, the Jewish community in Mashhad had to appear to be Muslim, but they secretly observed Judaism in the privacy of their own homes. They would attend services at mosque, they would appear to fast during Ramadan, they wore Muslim dress, they bought halal meat and also Muslim-made bread. However, behind closed doors, they would secretly continue to observe Jewish law. They would keep pets to whom they would feed the halal meat, and they secretly would prepare kosher meat, and they would also grow wheat and make their own bread. The nature of this secret meant that the Mashhadi Jewish community were very tight-knit, and this continued when many of them came over to Britain during the 1920s and 1930s. So this next photo demonstrates this community setting in North London in the 1920s. We can see Jewish men gathered wearing tali-tots or prayer shawls. One is holding a Torah, and it appears that a bimah is in front of them. We also see women behind them, and this signals an Orthodox setting. They appear to be worshipping in a house belonging to someone from the community. Now, when this community first came over, they came to Stamford Hill and were very different from their Ashkenazi neighbours who had fled Eastern Europe during the Great Migration and moved to North London from the East End of London. The Mashhadi families stuck together and created synagogues in their homes, as is what they were used to doing in Mashhad. This next photo is a photograph of women from the Mashhadi Jewish community in Britain. These women seem to all be wearing Western style clothing, which perhaps signals the changes in women's lives once they were no longer in Mashhad. In Mashhad, Jewish women were often kept illiterate and married very young, often as young as 13, so as to keep the Jewish line within the community. And in so doing, would be able to say that they were already committed, preventing a match outside of the community. When coming over to Britain, as was often the case, men often came first, and they traded mostly in rugs and diamonds. And once they settled, they called for their wives and children. Now, life in the West would have been a major shock for these women who were used to an observant Muslim culture which influenced their lives. This photo, which was taken in 1945, suggests that young women who had established lives in Britain and roots in Mashhad moved away from traditional dress of their parents and grandparents and ways of life. But regardless, the Mashhadi Jewish community remained relatively close-knit. For example, during the Second World War, the community pretty much moved en masse down to Torquay in Devon, where the women and the children installed themselves in boarding houses, and they went to local schools, and the fathers would remain in London to work and would come down every weekend for Shabbat. Most of London's Mashhadi Jewish community left Stamford Hill and now live in and around Finchley. Other Mashhadi Jewish communities mostly live in Israel, New York, Hamburg, and Milan, and have retained their unique culture. Now, these photos in our collection enables us to represent and learn about a less known Jewish community. Their unique history, one that is seldom told in the histories of Jews who were forced to convert to another religion. Now, while we are able to share some information on this unique community, we would still like to learn more about their unique culture. If anyone has any links to the Mashhadi Jewish community or any other community that we don't hear much about, we'd love to hear from you. Feel free to comment below this video. Thank you so much for joining me today. Do join us next week for another object talk from objects in our collection. Thank you so much, and goodbye for now.